Hello, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 19th. This is day two of week 20th. Today, we're going to be talking about handling tokens on the front end, authentication for API calls. Have you guys covered any authentication thus far in the course?
Not with React.
A little bit with the back end, yeah.
Yeah, the back end for sure.
Using like
Jonathan,
post,
yeah, can you
yeah.
explain exactly what you learned, how to handle the tokens on the back end?
I think we had CRUD operation. We used Postman. We sent a request for a token, and then when we wanted to use our token, we had to put it like in the body or something, I forget where we put it, but we put it somewhere in the input. I'd have to go back to like know for sure how we did it.
Gotcha. So it's just a JSON web token based authentication, right?
Yeah, it was some kind of simple token thing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we're going to do something somewhat similar today, but instead of handling those security tokens on the back end, we're going to have React handle the token in order to handle the request. And here's a diagram. I'll drop this in the chat. Uh, here's a diagram you probably already looked at, but we're just going to go over this pretty quickly here. So this is uh, the part of the GitHub repo that we're at. We're just going to look at this user auth flow that you probably have you seen this diagram before or something pretty similar?
Yeah, that was in Django when we were doing Django.
Okay, perfect. So I won't beat a dead horse, but just as a recap, let's say I land on a new website and they require for you to do certain things to have an account. So I send my username and password, I sign up, right? They create a new user with an associated token. Then I try to log in with that same username and password. I get a token. I hold on to it. And holding on to the security token can take a lot of different forms, right? You're going to notice today, we're going to just, in the example that we're going to use, we're going to store it just in use state and hold on to it on the front end in that manner. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can hold it in local storage. You can hold it as a cookies. You ever go to your Amazon account and you're still logged in? Yeah. I've never looked, but it's probably a cookie. And they're holding it and it has an expiration, right? 90 days, 6 months. I don't think I've logged into my Amazon account in a long time. I think that cookie length is probably 6 months or a year, um, which has benefits and drawbacks, right? The benefit is you don't have to keep pestering someone for their password all the time and logging into a website that they go to a lot. But obviously, the drawback is the longer those credentials are there, the more exposed and more vulnerable their data is, right? So give and take. So we get that token, right? And then further API requests, we just send that token to authenticate that, hey, we are we are who we say we are. Go ahead and send us back that information. They take the validity of the token and then they send a response, right? They send the package of data or the body. So pretty straightforward. That's what we're going to attempt to do today. But before we get into that, this is just basic JWT authentication, and JWT just stands for JSON Web Token. But you're going to notice that there's a lot of different kinds of authentications. There's LDAP, there's OAuth, there's API key authentication. Have you guys pinged an API that API key yet? You guys do like the NASA API or anything like that?
Last night I signed up for like I think it was IMDb, and they had me request an API key. I just put it at the end of the request with the and
Yep,
symbol. It was easy.
yep. There you go. And some are like that, but did they have you create an account?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's another form of authentication to ping an API. And I briefly mentioned Amazon and their cookies, but they're not the only ones that use that. I think they all use that. Session-based authentication, that's what that's known. And of course, you guys already know multi-factor authentication, where you have you have the Duo or the Google Authenticator or the Microsoft Authenticator on your phone, and you log in and then you have to press a authorize or like a PIN code in your phone. Yes. So that's another example of authentication. Then you'll have, when you get your work computer, you have like certificate-based authentication. If you have one of the new MacBooks, you put your finger and you can scan your fingerprint. That's how I opened my Mac Air, right? That's just biometric authentication. When I was in Afghanistan and we caught terrorists, we had to make sure that we knew who they were. We actually, some of you guys might have done this. We scanned their retinas. We had this little machine and we scanned their retinas because people can mess with their yeah, people can mess with their fingerprints, but they're not gonna cut their eyes out, right? So that's how we knew we got the same person, regardless of what they said or what their fake document said. If anyone has ever been to Afghanistan or a lot of those countries, one of the interesting things about that, complete side note, is they don't keep, at least when I was there in 2009, they don't keep like public records. So when the US invaded, they had to give everyone a birthday. So everyone's birthday is January 1st, and they try to guess the year. Anyone have an experience like that? Yeah, so interesting story. Once I traveled with an old Terp that a friend of a friend had to Mexico, and their Afghan passport wouldn't even scan. They had to call in like the super mega manager of the Monterrey International Airport. They're like, "Hey, dude, can we let this guy into the country?" Obviously, he was who he said he was, but it's just, I mean, it barely looked like a passport. Let's just say that. Anyway, cool. So biometric authentication is not just a little, fingerprint on your laptop. Is used in a lot of different use cases. And then you're going to have like Microsoft ID, ICAM in government computers. That's just not the only one. There's a bunch of different ones. But authentication is a really big thing. Let me fix my video here. Authentication is a really, really big thing. Got to keep people's data secure. Super, super important. And there's a couple of concepts that I want to go over that deals with authentication. The first one is a concept that you're going to learn is the principle of least privilege that I'm sure I've covered with most of you here. So this is a really important concept. You might even get it on an interview. Anybody know what that is? Principle of least privilege?
Isn't that everybody has only the permission they need?
Yeah, exactly. And the like super lame example that I always give is that if I worked like in the HR department for like a big company and I had 3 people working under me. One of them was in charge of Europe, one of them was in charge of North America, and one of them was in charge of South America. There's no reason for the director of Europe to have access to any of the information of people in North America or South America, right? All their work, or even specific countries, right? They wouldn't, even though they are part of HR, they have no business with personal PII for people that are not in the region because they would have nothing to do with it. Make sense? So principal least privilege, super, super important. You're only going to give someone the bare minimum credentials or privileges or authentication to do what they need to do and nothing more. Not a thing more. Right here, the example that you see here is you get the specific token that's tied to your username, right? That's the example we give you. But these systems get a lot more complex than this, right? And when you get to your job, you're going to have literally a plethora of different kinds of authentication. You're going to get LDAP, you might get Microsoft ID, you're going to get, your repos in GitHub or GitLab or wherever are going to have their own token-based authentication. Sorry, give me 1 second. You're going to have a YubiKey on your computer, and you're going to have a security pin as well. You might also have Duo for something specific that you're trying to do, right? So there's going to be a reoccurring theme. Make sense? Authentication. I am working on a government contract right now, and we have to take it a step further. I had to go down to the local DEER's office and get a CAT card. So we also have CAT card authentication, right? On top of everything my work computer already has, right? So I'm going through like literally, not an exaggeration, 12, 15 different types of authentication for different things. Super common thing in tech. So principle of least privilege, you're going to hear that a lot. You also might hear slightly more advanced is zero trust architecture. What does that sound like?
You don't trust anyone?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of falls in line a little bit with a principle of least privilege, but it's designing an architecture that no user and no application, super important thing, right, is trusted by default. Actually, the opposite, right? Everything assumes that everything else is insecure. So inherently, by default, blocks everything. And there has to be specific rules or privileges given to a user so they can access it. Because if there is no policy, is a no on every system, every action. And something I haven't mentioned yet, this is pretty simple, right? It's a token that's associated with the user, right? But as I said earlier, these get really complex, right? You get into, you're very rarely going to have, well, not rarely, you're going to have individual authentication tokens and things that are just uh, assigned to your username or your alias, right? But you're also going to have security groups or LDAP groups or Microsoft AD groups, right? And certain groups, like let's say the group of developers, are going to have said privileges, right? The DevOps people are going to have certain privileges. Maybe the manager that oversees some DevOps people and some developers are going to share some of those privileges. So that's going to be another group, right? And they're all going to share, right, certain level of access for certain things. You see how this kind of starts to become really complicated? Yep, makes sense. And ultimately, this is how it works at big companies, right? Let's say you just onboarded to your team and they need to give you access, something really, really simple, access to their GitHub repo of this application because you're going to start working on it. Cool. Do you think they just add you individually?
I think so.
They don't. That was a little bit of a trick question. They would just add you to a group.
Oh, oh,
Right? Because people come and go all the time, right? There's reorgs all the time, right? So what actually makes most sense is a lot of those permissions. If you need access to this specific repo, you might need specific access to something similar or an adjacent repo, right? So what they're doing is they're probably using LDAP groups or something, right, to manage permissions on certain repos. So they would just add you to, the DevOps group or the, internal application group or whatever name they gave it to it, right? They just onboard you to that. That would give you permissions to that specific repo and probably anything else that you would need, right? Now, if you were doing like a cross-team project or working on something really big when you have multiple teams, right? That in itself would probably be a separate group that you would have to be added to.
Is that the I am
In inside the cloud on AWS, yes.
okay, awesome.
Yeah. So you have these privileges, right? In AWS is called IAM. But it's not just for individuals, it's also for what? It's for groups and also what? You have to give people permissions, you have to give group permissions. What else you have to give permissions to as a developer?
User?
No, that's people. Or external people anyway. Yeah, those two.
The app.
Yeah, your applications, right? Your application is running in the background, right? It's doing something. It needs permission, right, to access resources, right? Does it need, to get credentials to access a database, right? Does it need to get personal information from a database and then cross-check it with another database, right? Who's allowed to do that?
Are you basically
Right.
saying when the application needs to reach out to another instance that you have on AWS? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you need to authenticate somehow, right? You're not just going to let any application access anything, right? That's not principle of least privilege at all. That's not zero trust. That's not best practice. I'm just going a broad overview of the importance of this because it really is really important. And if you ever get the opportunity to become kind of like a security engineer, those guys make some of the most money ever. Those guys are like high frequency trader devs, man, because it's just in demand, right? People are always trying to break into systems and leak information and hack people's Bitcoin wallets. So being really good at that stuff will carve you out a nice little career. So this is actually really important. That's my spiel on that. Okay, security, super important. So let's hop into this. Everyone should be at this page. We're just gonna follow the instructions and launch this application and then kind of walk through it. So if you haven't done so already, go ahead and clone the Wines API and launch it. And the only other thing you have to do is clone the React front end and launch it. Eventually, you should get this right here if you launched it properly. Shouldn't take too long. Might take 5-7 minutes. I'm going to pause the recording and let everyone get to this point. Alrighty, so everyone should have some version of this. I went ahead and I already created a login, so I'm going to go ahead and log in with my user. If you haven't already, you can go ahead and sign up, do something really easy. I just did Max, password 123, log in. When I hit this login button, what do you expect to happen?
Like a page to change of some sort?
Yeah, it's going to be a redirect, right? Where probably?
I don't know, some kind of wines search.
Yeah, yeah. So ideally back to the wines page, right? So let's see if I get that. All right, I do get the wines page. So that means I am logged in, right? So it worked. There you go. That's what I was trying to do. I just added them. I just exec into the Docker container and then just ran, just added the wines. If you look at the code, give me 1 second. Boom. Here, the code is in the setup data, and then you could just run to set it up. There you go. So that's what I did to have it populate. So there you go. I can actually see it. Let's analyze the UI before we dive into the code. What's kind of wonky here? I'm already logged in, so let's just analyze the UI, and then we'll discuss the code here in a second. What's kind of wonky here?
You mean style wise or
Yeah, yeah.
like
I'm,
what is the 25? It doesn't really tell you what.
oh, yeah. Yep. I think that, what is that? 8. I think I can look at the code and it should be, give me 1 second. Price. It should be price. So name, price, and varietal, which is, I guess, a kind of wine. I'm sure I probably didn't pronounce that name correctly. It doesn't matter. Okay, cool. So that's what these things are. But let's look at the nav bar. What stylistically kind of is throwing you off? Yeah, it doesn't have a label for price or what type of wine it is, right? But look at the nav bar. It's kind of, I am logged in and now I can see this wine list. They just point to things that are kind of off.
The login should probably appear once you're logged in. You mean?
Yeah, that's really misleading, right? So think about this. When you get cut loose to create your own UI, keep that in mind. When I'm logged in, the login button shouldn't be an option anymore, only the logout button. Make sense? The sign up button should also be what?
Saying
Should
that
be, yeah,
Should
gone.
probably be gone, yeah.
Should be gone. I'm logged in. That means I have to have an account. I don't need to sign in. Right? So I really should only have 2 buttons here. I should have wines and then log out or whatever other options, but definitely sign up and log in if I'm already logged in. Don't make sense there. Right? That's a simple Boolean that you can fix. right? I'm sure that's not the point of this lesson, but I just wanted to look at that. All right, so if I click on wines, I'm here. If I go to sign up, I can still sign up, apparently. But what if I press wines here? Am I still going to be logged in?
I would hope so, but I don't know.
Yeah, right. So it's still saving my token and it's still recognizing me, right? So these should be gone. If I log out, it should redirect me to the main page, right? Where I can't see the wines.
Right.
Let's see. Are you sure you want to log out? It's another just to make sure that I do. Yes, I want to log out. Okay, cool. So I logged out and then the login, it actually doesn't redirect me to the wines because I can't see them. After I log out, it kicks me back to the login screen. Okay, that's fine. But in this specific UI here, what should be gone?
The sign up.
Probably the logo.
Yeah, the logout. The sign up, yeah, if you have a different account or something, login is fine, but the logout should be gone there. Just wanted you guys to look at that for right now. All right, cool. So you must be logged in to get the wines. Okay, I'm going to do this one more time. Make sure this works. Max. 1, 2, 3. Log in. Cool. Takes me to the wines page or whatever. There you go. Why is that so slow? Okay, I don't know. But there you go. Log out. Okay, so that works. Tells me, hey, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Cool. All right, so this works. Let's look at the code here. If you were to start analyzing this code, where would you go first? This is code that you haven't seen before. Remember, we're authenticating via the front end. So this is the code for the front end, React tokens main, right? So where would I go first?
I always want to start an app, JSX.
Yeah, same. I always want to start an app as well. So let's look at this and we're just gonna kind of break it down, right? These are imports. You stay hash router for my routes. That makes sense. Nav bar, I see a nav bar. I see a login, sign up. Wines, right? Makes sense. I have wines. Log out. This all makes perfect sense to me. This is form data, username and password. They're keeping it in the uState hook. Makes sense. User token, notice, is set to null. So I imagine when I log in or I sign up, right, it kicks me back that token, and set user token does exactly what the name suggests, right? It saves that token, right? Okay, cool, makes sense. This handles the token, right? It grabs a username or password, and then it sets the token in use state. Cool, that makes sense. This is handle input change. What is this handling? What kind of input? It's a form that's handling what data?
Your login
E-target.
info?
Yeah, e-target kind of gives it away, right? It's my max and password. Okay, cool. That works. And then I lock down, it's being wrapped in router. So there's going to be several routes. This is a component, just a nav bar, and these are my routes, right? That are inside of nav bar. That makes sense, right? All that is tracking based on the UI. Okay, so then we have a route to wines. Yep. Sign up, log in, and log out. Awesome. And what is it? User token, handle token, user token. 3 of these routes, you need specific tokens. Okay, cool. This all makes perfect sense. Now, where would I go? If we're talking about front end token authentication, where would you go?
So is there no routes on main.jsx?
Let's look. No, just the app.
Okay, because I wish this routes and router would have been on the route day because that's a new way of doing routes. So
Yep.
note for the future.
Yes. And I kind of don't want to confuse everyone, but app.js, you kind of think that app.jsx is only going to be one app, right? Do you guys think about that, or is that just me?
I don't know. The way it's been taught is like you do everything in app.jsx and then main is for something else. But now I'm like, I wish, like I said, I wish we would have learned routes because this looks a way more streamlined way to do routes than what was taught previously.
Great feedback. Definitely put that in the feedback form, and I'll definitely post it after class. As we always post in the instructor channel, just any good feedback that we got, so all the instructors know. I'll definitely post that.
Yeah, because it was put out to do stuff in app.jsx. So that's why I was like, seeing this is like, okay, I'll have to research some of this stuff now.
Okay, I made a note of it. Yes, this makes perfect sense. That constructive feedback. They put all the routes here just in a nav bar, and main.js just has the app component here. I kind of don't want to get too much into it for two reasons. One, it's a little confusing, and two, it's kind of the border of my expertise as far as React goes. In my mind, I always thought the app.js, oh, it's the complete app. But that's not, depending on how big your application is, app.jsx, it's always going to be multiple apps that make one app. And that's what ultimately goes here. I know that's kind of confusing right now because our applications are so small, and you're like, oh, that should hold everything. No, that should only hold the 12 apps that make up the big app. Think about a big application like Airbnb, right? Their app.js is not just going to have one. It's going to have, I would have to speculate how much, but a lot of them, right? And it's going to be incredibly modular. Why? More maintainable. Not only that, but also it's going to affect the way that they architect their application, right? They're probably not running some kind of monolith, some big code base, right? They're running probably microservices, and it makes sense to chop down the giant application into very small components that run on different microservices. Why? Easier for deployments, easier to figure out when something breaks where it is.
Does it matter? Like that confuses me. There's still only one return statement though, right? If,
Yes, only one. And you can tell, oh, I guess after a certain time, my computer goes to black mode, my Mac. Yes, there's only one return statement because here, think about it. All the routes in the nav bar, right, are wrapped in a router, and that's the only thing it's returning on that main page.
so when you say there are multiple apps inside app.jsx, are you just talking about like the wine sign up login?
No, those are just small components. I understand why this makes a little bit more sense, but this app is so small, right, that you can get away with doing it this way. Imagine if you had like 12 or 15 or 20 like big components, right? All those subcomponents wouldn't be an app. That file would be thousands of lines long. No one's going to read through that. That's a nightmare. And that's kind of part of the reason why I didn't want to kind of bring it up, right? That you think a React app and you think, oh, it's one. That's not really React, right? A React app could be made up of a bunch of different apps.
But there's only one app.jsx or
Yeah, there's only one app JSX, yes. But
I-
again, the name is kind of misleading.
okay.
I wouldn't get too caught up in that, but I just wanted to give you a little context, right? Why some of the architecture is a little different. Depending on where you go, they're going to have an SOP for how they build internal apps. What are the requirements? How they build anything that's external facing. Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it'll just take time for any of us, especially me, to just figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Job, new thing, just have to figure it out.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a little bit of context as to why there's variation in some of the ways that the curriculum is written.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
So this is way easier to understand, for sure. But you wouldn't normally do it this way if it was a production level application. Why does it make sense here? Because what are you returning? A nav bar. That's it. You can get away with it. Just like right now, you could, in theory, put everything on one page and it wouldn't be too bad. But again, small application. All right. So we saw the nav bar, right? We went to main.js. There's nothing there, nothing to look at. All right, everything is here. So where would you go, knowing that you have to? You're working through this React token authentication piece. Where would you go first? There's not necessarily right way, but kind of want to walk you through this.
Again, I was taking time to look at this earlier and just it looked like I needed to know what the user was inputting, so that I ended up going to form.jsx.
Form.jsx. Let's look at it. All right, cool. We go to form.jsx. It's just some form that's being exported. It's got a couple parameters: form type, handle input change, form data, handle submit, response message. Cool. Then we look at it and it's returning. What is it returning?
It's turning the login screen.
It's what?
Returning the login screen.
Yeah. Right. So form is this login, and it's going to take user input, right? It's just a form. Anytime it's a form, you know it's going to take user input, right? Okay. So it's the login functionality, right, that captures user input. Pretty straightforward, right? And we know that, right, handle submit, right? It's going to be something that we need to pay attention to, because what does this tell us here? Oh, handle input change, not that one. Sorry. Handle submit here on the form. What does this tell us?
The form with that button, which equals type submit on submit, is going to run that function.
Yeah, it's going to run whatever handle submit is. So where will we go from here? Because we need to know what's that doing. Okay, it's going to take my username, it's going to take my password, then on button click, it's going to run this function called handle submit. I need to know what it's doing.
If we want to see where it goes, we just command click it, then it'll take us where it is.
Command click.
No, it didn't. What? Oh, it took us up top. It's prop.
I can go to definition.
Looks like it's in login. The function is in login.
This should work. Why is this not working? Doesn't matter. Okay, login, right? All right, so we go here. And what function are we looking for?
Handle submit.
Handle submit. Okay, yeah, we look. Handle submit is here. It's grabbing, it's an async function, right? Which means it's got to wait for something to happen. So context is grabbing form data, username, the password, right? It's awaiting the login context, right? And then it's doing what here? It's checking for a
token.
Yes. So this is making what kind of CRUD operation here? We haven't actually looked at it, but we know it's making some kind of what? What CRUD operation is it making?
Creating.
Yeah, it's making some kind of post, right? It's making some kind of post of some kind, type, right? And we know that we're getting what back?
Yeah, the token.
Yeah, we're sending username and password from this form on the button click. It looks like, right? We're getting a token back. Then on line 16, we're checking this token, right? Checking if it's valid, probably. I don't know. I haven't exactly looked at the login function, but probably based on this context, right? Give an error if it isn't. But if it is, I want you to handle that token, right? And we should redirect, right? So if it's a valid token, right, I want you to handle that token, right? And redirect. Awesome. And this is just a little conditional. It says, hey, this is a Boolean. I want you to go to lines, right? And show me that list. If it isn't, hey, go back to the login screen because that was invalid, right? I'm kind of thinking I should go here and see what this does. Handle token, right? Because that's a function that I'm importing from where? Where's handle token coming from?
Back at the app, JSX.
Okay, back at the app JSX, that's where it's coming from. Okay, handle token. It's being passed a token. So let me see what's happening. Yep. That token, right? Setting the form data and sending user token in use state, right? It's sending the token at the top of the app. So I can hold on to it. Now I've changed this state. Hey, I have it, right? Super important. Awesome. So I know that on button click, it sends my username, sends my password, right? It authenticates, gets a token, returns it for me, and then I set it in use state so I can use it later, right? And it redirects me here, right? How do I know that? Because it sets the token and it quickly goes to should I redirect true? This hits this boolean. This is actually really poorly written, whoever wrote this. You heard me? Whoever wrote this. And then I should have said that. It doesn't matter. It's not the first time I've gotten in trouble. Okay. There's a boolean. It says should redirect. I just set it to true, so it's gonna navigate right there with that built-in router function. Navigate the /1s. That's why when I go username Max and I go password 123 and I hit login, right? It sets that state to the token after I've authenticated and redirects the line. Does everyone notice what we're doing here? We're just walking through the code. This is the most important thing you're going to do as a developer. Figure out the data flow, figure out why something isn't working, figure out how to fix it, figure out how to optimize it, figure out how to integrate it with a third-party service, figure out how to refactor something, right? Sometimes you'll have, this is a real example, this happens a lot. You'll have an internal application and then you'll get a new third-party service, but the third-party service already has a lot of functionality that you had code for, right? But you're paying for the third-party for service. Okay. So that pretty much eliminates a lot of your not spaghetti code, a lot of your good code if that functionality is already in the product that your company has bought. So you strip it, right? And then you integrate it. You're paying for the service. They're maintaining the code base. That's what you're paying them to do. Use the functionality. You don't need to have it now. We had actually a really big project that I was on where they were migrating to AWS and they had their own logging inside their Docker containers. We had to gut all their, because they had literal manual logging that they had because they weren't on the cloud, they were on-prem, right? So they were sending all these logs to Splunk, but I was like, hey, you don't need to do that. We have built-in CloudWatch because you're on the AWS ecosystem. So we had to go into 26 different containers and strip all this code, right? And because it was on ECS Fargate, it was built in. Pretty nice, right? Much easier to maintain, a lot easier to follow. And the ticket that was given to me was really, hey, remove all the individual logging, send me the PR. Make sure it works. Run the test, send me screenshots and attach them to the PR ticket. Saying, hey, our logging is working better than their logging, right? And literally, what was my ticket? Just gut the containers. That's a real life ticket. Right? Hard to do that if you can't follow the code, especially because all the containers are doing different things. Some were authenticating with Apple Pay, some were working with PayPal, some were getting movie times, some were getting show times, right? It was a big movie theater chain. Some were taking inventory of popcorn, right? They're all doing slightly different things, right? And logging slightly different things, right? Okay, so we're followed that. That's cool. That's logging right there, right? So what's the next thing we need to do? That's how it logs in. So the very next thing that we need to check is how do we what? We logged in. Now
Yeah,
we
it
just need to,
log out because it automatically took you to the wine screen.
there you go. Log out. So let's follow the data flow of the data flow of the logout, right? So it's here on, I went all the way to the top back to app.jsx, look at line 36, log out. It's going to show that component logout. It's going to do something with the user. It's still taking the user token. Okay. And it's setting the user token. Cool. So knowing that I have seen this, what file am I going to go to?
Log out JSX.
Yeah, let's go to logout.jsx. Okay, cool. So I go here and the user text takes set user token and user token, right? This is a function, right? This is some string, right? Handle logout, prevent default set user token. When you click on that button click, what happens to the token on line 7? It does what to it?
Gets rid of it.
Yeah, it nullifies it. It just effectively sets it to null, right? It sets the state to null. It invalidates the token. Don't need it, right? So the very next API request after you log out, I'm going to get this. I no longer have the token in use state. I don't possess it. Blocked out. Pretty straightforward, right? And then it says, hey, if I don't have a user token, just navigate to login. And that's exactly what happened. Actually, that's not exactly what happened. What did happen here? I misread this. When I press log out, it didn't actually log me out, right? It did what?
I went to the conditional.
Yeah,
Are you sure you
yeah.
want to
It
log
just,
out?
are you sure you want to log out, right? And then on that next button click, it logged me out, right? The logic really is that simple for a lot of these things. Yeah, simple Boolean conditions, right? So there you go. That's log in, log out. That's authentication using a JWT or a JSON web-based token. Probably one of the, I would argue, is probably the easiest authentication method. Things get way more complicated than this. This is, I guess, yeah, in my, outside of just username, password, JW2 is probably the second easiest way to authenticate something. When you get to your real job, it won't be that easy. You get like encryption keys and private keys and public keys and hashing, and starts becoming kind of a mess. And the whole idea of even keeping your password secure will take, I can't even remember the name of the vault, or it'll take some kind of storage, parameter store for AWS or many of the third-party products they have out there, whose software's only job is to keep secrets and tokens and safe. And they built their entire business on that, and it works. Questions about this? This lesson is actually pretty straightforward.
So if we can do it on back end or the front end, how do we decide which way we want to do it?
It depends on the use case. And I know that's not a very good answer, right? But it really just depends on the use case. And it also depends on the APIs, right, that you're using. I'll give you a good example. I don't know if they changed it, but the Yelp API won't let you authenticate on the front end. You have to do it on the back end. So it's use case dependent. And as a junior dev, you won't be making all those big decisions, right? They'll just cut your tickets, be like, hey, do this. And eventually when you become more senior, I think they let you make big decisions like that. I don't know. I'm not there yet, so. Yeah, you won't be making any of those big decisions for a while. They'll just be like, hey, we're going to do this. And you'll be like, yes, ma'am.
We just have to make that decision on our personal project, right?
Yeah. And again, depending on the API, I don't know how Spotify does. I don't remember. That might be a backend one too. So it really just depends. Typically, I've heard of this, but I haven't done that much research. You kind of don't want to handle important credentials on the front end, but it does have several use cases. So here we are. Any other questions, guys? Alrighty, the challenge is write a React front end to a DRF project of your choice that uses token authorization. What DRF projects do you guys have loaded up? Don't do wines. You have to have, they do still do the school one, right? Can you do that one? Schoolhouse or school app? They have the newspaper one, I think. Help me out, guys. I don't remember.
I'm trying to remember.
Any that we have, I think I've messed up trying to play around with it and learn different things.
That's totally fine. Why don't we just reflow the repo, right? Which one has the easiest schema that would be the easiest for you to deal with? And if you remember which week it was, probably going to be Django, right? You guys are going to have to do this, so try to help me out, guys.
So, I remember a while back, we did have to take an API we developed, and we did something similar with the front end. And it broke it down like this. Front end.
That was once.
So I'd like for everyone to try the same one, right? Just in case we have questions, everyone can kind of like lean on each other. So I kind of don't want everyone, it doesn't specifically, the assignment doesn't specifically call for this, but I'd like everyone to do the same one, ideally. And the only thing that I need from you is which is probably the easiest for you to tackle right now. Because remember that the idea here is not to relaunch a whole API or backend. It's just to build the front end with authentication on one of these DRF projects. That's it.
Let's say, do we have access to like the like a branch of the Pokemon setup where it's almost done or no?
Which week was that?
I think we slowly like worked on it week by week, so I didn't know if there was a branch where we could just pull like the completed one down.
Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Oh, admit. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. Don't want to do that. No, okay, I don't want to do that. Oh, let's do that. Okay. That's fine. How about this? We are just going to use the auth compose. Auth compose, but don't use the React front end in the README, right? Build a completely new project from scratch. Now, obviously have the React project on the side just in case you need to look at it. But really, has anyone ever heard of tutorial help? When you're learning
Yeah, where you
web,
just
that's
watch tutorials over and over, but you don't really learn anything.
yeah. So pretty much, right? So definitely have this React tokens main loaded up just in case you need to look at it. But really, what you really want to get used to is, okay, so we're going to use this DRF wine API auth. right? We're going to use this backend because it works, right? And I want you to create a new front end with React, literally from scratch, use Byte latest React project with JavaScript, literally from scratch, right? And just build that front end without looking at it as much as possible, right? That's what I want you to do since we can't decide on a project. We can use that one. We're just going to scrap the main one. And I want to kind of pseudocode it here before you guys get started here. Anyway, the reason why I mentioned tutorial hell is if you ever pull up any of those videos about learning how to code, Travis, those guys always say, hey, try to stay away from this, right? But when you're new, you can't help it but to follow along because you don't know anything. But ultimately, the crux to the whole thing is kind of thinking things out, right? And trying to solve how you do it. Trying to figure out how to start it, even if you're not starting with the beginning, you're starting with the middle or you're starting with the end, right? That's the whole crux to this software development thing, right? And trying to come up with these solutions. There's not going to be a video for those solutions at work. A lot of those problems are going to be one of one. They're going to be similar to what you see on Stack Overflow or somewhat similar to maybe what ChatGPT spits out, but they're never going to be identical. And it's going to be your job to kind of figure out how to do it. So I just told you what we're going to do. We're going to use this backend, this DRF1 API with auth compass, right? How are we going to start it? We're going to create a brand new, this is Python, oops. We're going to create a brand new project. You can see my screen, right? Okay, we're going to create a brand new project, bootstrap it, do all that good stuff. Then how are we going to start this? Again, keep in mind, try not to look at the React link that we used for our demo. Try to do it without it, honestly. Try to do it without it, and maybe a little bit of Google help. Try not to look at it. What's the next thing we're going to do? It can be in any order. Remember, we're gonna write out pseudocode some steps. But again, if you can't start with the beginning, just like I mentioned earlier, start with the third step, start with the last step, do it in, go bullet point 3, then 7, then 2. If that's how it comes to you, do it that way. But we're just going to walk through some key points that you need to figure out here. So we're going to create a brand new project. Then what are you going to do?
Make the sign-in route. So we have a new project, right? We have a blank page basically. So maybe make the sign-in route.
Yeah. Code sign-in route.
Because that's going to be the crux of the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So
Code
like
out sign-in route. This is a lot. That's a giant step. What else? We can break that down further, but for right now, let's leave it. What else? Well, I guess if you followed that logic, you would need what else? Code out the
we'd have to make all the routes basically.
Let's just focus on 2, right? What's the main crux of this assignment? Sign in, sign out, right? Okay. React front end authentication. All right, so code out sign in route, code out sign out route. But those are big steps, right? Can we break that down any further?
So once you got like the input and everything for the person to put in, then from there you can probably code in your authorization piece, which would be just logic, right? For the routes.
Yeah.
Not for the routes.
What's happening right now, Sean? I think you're the main contributor, but I think everyone would do something very similar to what you're doing. What's the issue? What's happening right now? These are all what? Really what?
Components?
Yeah, they're components, but they're really big. Get user input and code in auth piece. That can't be one step. That's a bunch of steps.
Would it be like create a form?
We can get smaller and that's getting better, right? Create a form. Okay, these are all disjointed, totally fine, right? What is going on? Is that not my Dulipa? No. Create a form. Yep. What else? This is your pseudocode. How would you do it? I'm asking
Create a
you run into this. I'm
form.
gonna break you up into like, 12 different groups, right? You're gonna be there and you're not gonna type anything for minutes. You're like, oh, I don't even know what to do. Right. So you're going to go through this. So I'm trying to help you. So we're trying to do this together right now.
So
Oh, go ahead, keep going.
create some kind of containers. So make a use state, set of use state, or is that getting too in detailed?
No, we get create use state hook.
And handler functions, handling functions.
What kind of handling functions? What are they going to handle?
Like on submit? Is that what you're asking?
On submit functions. Well, I create submit functions. What are they going to submit?
Create a button.
Let me get Kim first. What are you going to submit, Kim?
I was thinking whatever the user puts in the form.
User form data. Okay, cool. All right, you guys are still thinking too big. You're thinking way too big still. All right. I realized that we haven't had a break and I've been yakking for like 90 minutes or something like that. So I'm going to yak for another 2 minutes and then we'll go on break and then I'll cut you loose. This is all well and good. They're still thinking too big. I'm going to break down, and I hate to do this, but I'm not getting a lot from you guys right now. I'm going to do this how I would do it, right? Makes sense? How young Guillermo would do this. Are you ready?
Yes.
Display login button. Display logout button. Add conditional if click log in, don't display log. Display login button, display logout button. If log in, click disappear button. This is fire right now. This is great. I have 2 buttons, and if I click log in, the login button disappears. And it just shows the logout. That's already enough to get started, right? That's enough to get started.
It's not overwhelming just looking at it like that.
Yeah. Display. Can you show a login button on your screen? Cool. Can you show a logout button? Awesome. When I press the login button should disappear. When I press the logout button, if I click log out button, log out should disappear and log in should appear. Right? That's what it is. There's nothing more to it. That's it. I have the conditional rendering of my components. If I do this right the first time, they're going to be the same. What's the only thing difference? I'm going to pass what to these components?
Your inner text or whatever you call it.
Yeah. I'm going to maybe some inner text, but I'm going to pass in what functionality? The handle button clicks, right? Handle it. And those are functions I haven't written, right? However I wanted to do this, I would be create function that clears use state, right? By the same token, I would have to create a function that, sets it to user input. Oh, I don't even have a user input, so I don't even have to do it that order. But display user input for password. Display user input for username. This is all out of order, completely out of order. The more times you do this, the better you're going to get at it, right? But if I'm just starting out, I'm literally just displaying components and then figuring. Really, the easiest way to do it is just to display all the components, right? And then write the functionality, right? And get it to flow like it's supposed to. right? Because the components are not going to change that much. You're just going to pass some functions, maybe some inner text. You're going to pass some functionality, right? Which are just props. So if I was literally starting out, that's what I would do, something like that. And yes, I know that this is not a very impressive, but what is impressive is that I can get started quickly. I can gain a little bit of synergy, right? And when the instructor tells me, hey, do you want to show? I have something, right? Okay, stop share. Okay, sorry, I just ran really long. All right, let's take a 20-minute break. Really long break. Typically don't like breaks that long. But at 7:15, I'm going to open up the rooms right now, but take a break, grab a snack, whatever, and then we'll come back. I'll throw you all in rooms, right? And we can get started. Remember, main objective, just create a login page, ideally without looking to the DRF with auth compose wine thing. Yes?
We're fine looking on the MUI page though.
I was going to mention that, but I didn't want to make this overwhelming. How about this? If you figure out all of it, right? If you figure out this assignment before the class is done, if you wanted to start replacing some of your components with MUI components, that'd be a pretty awesome exercise to do, right? Tackle this because this is easier right now than kind of getting more comfortable with Material UI or Bootstrap or any other framework. I would try to do this first, but if you had extra time or a little bit of a stretch goal, kind of mess with Material UI, because if you use Material UI for your personal project and your group project, I'll be honest, it's going to look better.
Okay, so just write the simple code. Don't try
Write the simple code functionality first, and then something that looks aesthetically pleasing later.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, break. Sorry, took a long time. All right, guys, I opened a bunch of rooms. Feel free to jump into one of them and then get started. I'll jump around, see how you guys are doing.
Give me 1 second.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. I just didn't want all the time to elapse. Wait another 12 seconds or so. Give me a second. Sorry. Jumped the gun a little bit. Okay, cool. We're back. I just didn't want all the time to elapse before we got a chance to touch base. How are we doing?
Oh, me, I'm doing terrible because I couldn't even get the damn Wines API to work. So I think I spent too much time trying to figure that out.
Okay, I would delete everything and re-clone it, re-download, and start from there. Believe it or not, on the job, sometimes that happens.
Hey,
Yep.
Sean, when you forked it over, there's a box that says only clone or only fork main branch. Make sure you uncheck that. Then
Yeah, I
when
got all the
you,
branches. I saw
okay,
that too. I noticed that it didn't clone down a Docker file as well, so I added that, but it's still giving me the same errors. So I can't even.
Default to literally downloading the zip folder and going from there. That's what I did because it was kind of acting wonky at first too. And when you're on the job, believe it or not, sometimes that happens, and that's kind of what I was trying to say. Sometimes when things got really messy, I would clone copies of the branch. I'd have like, feature branch, whatever, one, feature branch two, three, four, and then I'd work on three and four. If I messed them up, I knew I had two copies. Sometimes I'd have to rebase a bunch of changes, but I'd make a copy of it before I mess with it. Or I branch off as test and then merge it and then mess with that. And then at the end of the day, if feature branch 6,000 works, you can just delete your old branch, rename it, and push it up. Does that make sense? Right? Like if your specific feature branch was supposed to be called something, but you made so many changes in so many different branches, you can always just delete it and rename the branch that works, that name, and push it up, and Git won't know the difference. Is that optimal? No, but sometimes we get ourselves into trouble like this, right? So you got to get yourself out some way. Okay, so I would really just suggest just downloading the zips and opening and figuring it out from there. Because ultimately, if you push the code, maybe some people will look at it, maybe nobody will look at it. It doesn't really matter. It's just the learning that matters, right? Anyone else? How far are we?
I made a form with two inputs and two buttons. I'm currently working on when the button is clicked to get the data from the input. So
And you could just have console login initially, right? On the button click, have your dev tools open, right? And on the button click, just console log it for now. If you haven't written the code for it to do anything, right?
yeah, because right now all I have is the skeleton, just with the inputs and the buttons. And so
Yep. Yeah, and you can just console log for the functions, right? All of them could just be a console log saying, hey, it's returning username, token, whatever. That would work. Who else?
Like Sean, I had to fix the wine API, but then once I got it fixed, I didn't get far after that. I made like a login component, a logout component, and then I made like a state in my app. So then when you click on login, it says, welcome, you're logged in. You click log out, it says, please log in. And then I was starting to put like the inputs in, but that's about as far as I got.
Good. That's really good. Anyone else? If I'm looking for where you guys are at and if you're stuck on anything specific that we can help with right now. Or you just need more time, which is it?
I'm pretty much at the same spot as Jonathan. I have an input for username and password submit, and the login and log out button disappearing when you click them.
And they
But I
work.
haven't done anything with it. Yes.
Can you show us actually? Because that's kind of what I was talking
Yeah.
about earlier.
Mhm. This is all I have. So can you see this screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It just changes.
Yeah, can you show us the logic for that?
So show you the what for it?
Yeah, just the logic, the code for it.
Oh, yes. Um, all right there.
Can you walk us through it?
So I started adding the function, and then I wrote the returns, what I would want. I made the buttons, and then I made the event handler. And I decided I needed to do the state so I could keep track if the button was clicked or not. Then I went and added this logic so it only shows login if the state is false. And then once it's clicked, it changes the state to true. So then log out is shown.
This is literally perfect. And when you actually add the functionality, that code just goes on line 7 for login and then line 10 for log out, right?
Yeah.
There you go. This is a perfect way to do it. And eventually you're going to get to the logic. And this does exactly what you're doing. Awesome. And then she can either work on the function, on those two functions, they'll handle login or handle log out, or she could work on the submit, grabbing user input, which is just an event. event target, right? Straight up.
Yep, yep.
So ultimately, it really just is 3 button clicks, right? For the most part, right? If you already have a login, it's just a login, log out. Uh, yeah, log in, log out actually, and then the one list, the popular list. Pretty straightforward, right? Actually, can you go back to your UI, Daniel?
Yeah,
I
I'll
think
share again.
I think the give me a second. Let me look at this. There you go. Gotcha. Perfect. Yeah, I wanted to show the log out, and then she has a submit button, but the submit would really just be a login, right? Or a register an account. But for right now, this is fine. Eventually, you refactor later. Actually, thank you for that, Daniel. Actually, I can show the. I was wondering. This is log out. I'm going to show step 2. Share. Can everyone see the screen? This is just our application earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to point this out because eventually some people are really great with user experience and how a website looks. I just noticed by actually looking at yours, Danielle, right, that you had an extra submit button, even though what kind of experience would that be? With that, the submit is just a login, right, or it's a log out, so there's no need for a submit button. But then when I thought about it and I went to look at this, right, there's 2 login buttons here. This is bad. It's bad UX. And you're like, oh, it doesn't matter if it doesn't have to look that nice. It matters when people are paying money. People buy with their eyes. So if something kind of looks like crap, they're not going to want to spend a lot of money. Something looks great, even if it's really not that functional. Sometimes people buy it. Anyway, the way something looks super, super important. All right, you guys are doing good. I'm going to open back up the rooms. If you have any questions, definitely ping me. All right, I opened them. Start in about 10 seconds. All right, everyone. How did we do? Did anyone finish by chance or get close? Who got the furthest along? Anyone? Where'd you get stuck, Daniel, if you don't mind me asking?
I didn't get any further than where I was. I was reading on routers.
You you were waiting on what?
I was reading about the routes.
Ah, I got it about the routes. So you got
Mhm.
stuck in the router part. Let me look at this
Mhm.
again. Okay. Can you share your screen, Daniel? Let's see if we can do at least one route. I'm sure you're not the only one that got stuck on that. Routing, the concept of routing is, well, one, insanely important, and two, not the easiest thing to understand. All right, cool. So you got stuck on routes. So you're reading about something. Um, what specifically were you reading about? Like trying to add a new route, trying to redirect on a button and click? What was the issue?
I was looking, one second. I was looking at the code from lecture today. I was trying to use this to navigate to the login page I was creating whenever I click the login button.
Gotcha. So you were trying to display the login page.
Yes.
and it wasn't working.
No.
Okay, let's go to your code. And do you have yours? Yes, you have yours loaded up. Can you put it kind of to the side?
I started having an issue. See right here,
Yep.
where I couldn't even get it to open again.
It looks like it's running on 301, 3001, sorry. Just do localhost 3001 and check if it loads. All right, cool. Go to your code.
It's just so annoying.
But you want to just put both of them just on the same screen. No, I don't want one to replace the other. I want both of them just to be superimposed on each other.
Just my mouse. I don't know if you have a Mac with this new thing where it goes to the side. I don't know how to take it off.
No, I do. I have a bunch of Macs. I've never seen this before.
Yeah, it's been doing
This,
it lately. There we go.
okay, so let's look here. Where are we? This won't, it's not actually showing what we need it to show, right?
Mhm.
And what page were you fixing or modifying before this broke?
All I did was install the router and did this page.
Okay, comment this page out. We need to get it back to where it's working.
Mhm.
You're not running multiple applications, are you? You're
Not
just
that I
running
know
one?
of. Yeah.
Okay, refresh this page. We need to get this to work. If not, we're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
Open your DevTools. This should go without saying. You should always have it open because we don't know what's being shown there. Go console. It's probably going to throw an error in here. There has to be something. It says failed to load module, expected JavaScript module script to server with the text.js strict main.jsx connecting. Go to main. Did you modify this page?
Hmm?
Did you modify this page?
No.
This looks modified. You should have React DOM here, right?
It should be.
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
think your
right.
installation, you messed up the installation. That's what it is. I would redo the installation here and backtrack a little bit. That's what's happening here. It's not even loading.
Okay.
No worries. Anyone else around this area in terms of completeness? Is completeness a word? I don't even know. Someone, I'm not sure where they're at. Completeness is a word. Okay, good. Eunice, where did you leave off? You hear me? What about you, Megan?
She just stepped away.
Oh yeah, she said BRB chat. Sorry. Daryl. Not
I
a
had the
people. A
same,
lot of people left. Where'd you end up?
I had the same issue with Sean where I was forking it, but it was forking the wrong repo. So I kind of just left that alone and went over to my personal project and just started working on the front end for that.
Okay, gotcha. Jonathan, where'd you end up?
I was trying to do like a on click for a route, which I found out you can't do on click. So when I installed my npm React Router DOM, it did the same thing to my main, and I lost everything. So now I just kind of like messed everything up trying to get it to come back.
Okay, so what's your next step here?
I tried to uninstall React Router DOM. It didn't
Mhm.
save it, so I'm gonna have to start probably a new project and then
Okay,
copy over like my components and stuff like that. I'm thinking.
okay, not the worst idea. At least you have a plan forward. Sean, where'd you end up?
I think I finally got the API to work, but I mean, I just have a button on my screen that goes from log out to log in. That's it.
Log out to log in. What were you working on when we called everyone back?
Like I had just finished up that logic where if you click log in, it just shows the log out button. It's not much. It's yeah.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Yeah, definitely some growing pains. That's okay. Do you guys have any questions about what you were supposed to do, even though we didn't get very far?
I think the whole
Anything?
idea, right, was to almost recreate the front end, like React tokens in a sense, but make it so we can create our own routes that'll touch the one API and bring back something, but also log into so that it can do that.
Yep. It really is really just pinging the backend to return the token, saving the token, right? And then really what's the rest of it? Just conditional rendering on the front end, right? If I have the token, if I have a valid token, right, log in. If I don't have a valid token, don't log in. That's it. It's a way to protect your application. Ultimately, you're going to get into like protecting routes and pretty much protecting any action that your application does. Because as we talked at the beginning, even applications need permission to access resources, right? Make sense? Right. So this is just a broad overview, so we can just wrap up. I definitely encourage you to, if you have a little bit of time before tomorrow's class, I know everyone works, so maybe that's not possible. Definitely try to complete it. I think this is a pretty doable exercise with a little bit more time. But I'll give you an example of something that a simple application might do, right? So on the front end, you're going to log in, right? It's going to ping some backend. It's going to validate your credentials, right? It's going to send back some token, and that token is given to you, right? It's going to be temporary. It could be 30 minutes. If you ever work on the AWS guys, it's 30 minutes, man. It's kind of annoying when you're developing actually, because your credentials expire all the time. So what most of us do is we have just simple bash scripts that we just run right away when our stuff is not working, and you got to refresh them all the time. It's a security thing, but when you're developing, 30 minutes is not long, right? You can't get a lot of things done if you don't know what you're doing in 30 minutes. But that happens all the time. So back to the application is going to return some kind of credentials that's going to give you the ability to do something, right? You're going to use those credentials for, paying an API for doing something. An application would do the same thing though, right? Let's say you trigger an event on an application. That application needs to get credentials for a database. I'll go into some kind of like vault or parameter store or secrets manager in AWS. I'll grab the credentials, right? Because there's a specific policy that says, hey, this application can go grab the credentials. It goes, grabs the credentials, holds them in, right? And then pings the database with those credentials. Hey, I'm authenticated, right? Because I have the credentials. It returns the data, that PII, that personal information that we have to protect, right? Returns it back to the application, shows it to the user. That's a gross oversimplification of what your banking app is doing. right? And all that information is compartmentalized. I don't think I pronounced that word right, but it is the right word, right? Meaning that all the users, right, are completely separate than all their personal information. And that's completely separate than all the banking information. And everyone's personal information and user information and banking information is completely separate from other people's. Right? And even in the lines of Guillermo Aguilar's banking line, maybe that row is locked, right? And it needs a special kind of credential to be looked at, or a specific column. So it can't just be that maybe an application is locked down, or an API is locked down, or a database, right? It can also be that a row is locked down, or a column. And you need one credential to ping the database, and you need another credential for the row. It can be that granular, depending on what it is. In a weird kind of way, that makes sense? Right, when when you're dropping your databases or looking at you know how you can see all the rows? Right, in a real application that had a lot of really sensitive information, depending on your credentials, you would only be able to see, maybe the first 10 rows, or anyone that didn't have a special designator as, top secret or something like that, or whatever the case may be. I'm just making stuff up, but those things exist, and that happens all the time. And you're like, hey, I'm only seeing 10 rows. No, that database has 15, but your credentials will only allow you to access the first 10. Make sense? I know that's really abstract, but that's the kind of things that eventually you're gonna have to deal with and see in real applications. Alrighty, that's all I have for you guys today. Tomorrow, I think Jordan's teaching. You're gonna go over context, right? I believe the context API. What kind of gets rid of prop drilling. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's pretty awesome. That's all I have for you. Any last minute questions, guys, before we wrap up? Alrighty. Don't get discouraged. That happens sometimes. The last thing I'll leave you with is sometimes I'll talk to my girlfriend. She's also a dev. And sometimes she'll talk to me. And sometimes some of the conversations that we've had, hey man, I didn't write one line of working code today. That happens sometimes.
I'll
Sucks.
I'll
But
go
that
down
does
to
happen.
I'll go down to my fiance during break and I'll be like, I'm so frustrated. I'll just like vent it out, and she's like, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that happens on the job too, unfortunately. And it feels worse because they're paying you then. All right, guys. Have a wonderful day.
All right, thank you.